Welcome to Passing the Plate, the podcast that's all about food, traditions, and the incredible connections they create. I'm Ashley Covelli, the food writer and recipe developer behind Big Flavors from a Tiny Kitchen.
And I'm Lisa Lisson, the genealogist and family history expert behind Are You My Cousin? We are your guides on this flavor-packed adventure. We're not just talking about recipes. We're diving into family history, exploring new cultures, and preserving favorite recipes for future generations. In short, we're celebrating the stories and tastes that come with every bite.
So grab a seat at the table and let's head out on a journey of flavor, tradition, and connection. This is Passing the Plate, where every episode is a feast for the senses and a celebration of togetherness.
Well, today we are talking about one of my favorite foods, and that is chocolate. I don't think that's really a surprise to anyone because, well, I'm often talking about how much I love chocolate. But Ashley, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I prefer milk chocolate as a rule, but I do love dark chocolate as well. But I guess you could really say I love all chocolate, quite frankly. But how about you? What's your favorite type of chocolate?
I was definitely more into milk chocolate growing up, but these days I'm firmly team dark chocolate. I'm not going to turn down chocolate, but usually by default, I would go dark chocolate. And that actually kind of surprises me about you, Lisa, because you like your coffee dark, kind of bitter, but you prefer the chocolate more sweet. That's interesting.
That I hadn't really thought about, but I do have a very strong sweet tooth in general, so that might have something to do with it. So here's a little known fact that you probably don't know about me, but I would love to be a chocolatier. I would love to learn how to be a chocolatier because I just love cooking with chocolate, and I just think, spending time in my spending an afternoon in my kitchen and making chocolate delights or anything chocolate. It's really kind of a goal of mine, and just to learn to work with it and work with it well.
I love that because it can be complicated to work with depending on what you're doing. It's not
Exactly.
always, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not always straightforward.
Right.
So, I'm perfectly capable of making a lot of chocolate chip cookies, which is very easy to make.
Certainly. And you're up for QC.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Now, we're going to have to take a step back here, guys, because I am the historian here on the team. And so let's talk a little bit about history of chocolate because, well, let's just find out how it all sort of got started. So I did a little bit of background research on this, guys, and just a really kind of a general overview of what we're seeing here on chocolate. So I found a really good article from a Smithsonian magazine on a brief history of chocolate that I will link in the show notes below. And I thought this was really interesting that for about 90% of chocolate's history, so, it's just been a very long history, it really was strictly a beverage and that sugar really wasn't added to it for quite a long time because chocolate has actually been around for about 2,000 years, but research actually suggests that maybe it was being used even earlier. It was initially the bean itself, the cacao bean, was actually used as currency in some pre-modern Latin American populations. And it was considered quite valuable. It was used as currency. And then the sweetened chocolate really didn't appear, though, until Europeans discovered the Americans. And the Europeans actually didn't like it because it was being used more as it was a drink and it was bitter and they didn't care for it. And it was actually the Europeans who started mixing honey and cane sugar with it. And that actually became quite popular.
Can you imagine living in a world before chocolate and then you get to all of a sudden experience it? Like, that must have been wild.
That must have been.
Right?
By the 17th century, it was actually a very popular drink. It was a very fashionable drink, I should say, throughout Europe. But it really was by the, shall we say, upper classes, the upper socioeconomic classes. It was not something that was widely used among the populations. It was believed to be a nutritional drink and have medicinal properties as well. And it wasn't until about 1828 when a Dutch chemist found a way to make powdered chocolate. They took out about half of the natural fat or the cacao butter, and that's how we ended up with the cocoa powder that we have today. That was the beginning of our cocoa powder type thing. But it was still a while later. When you think about this 2,000-year plus history of chocolate, it was all the way until 1847 before we saw the first, what we would consider modern chocolate bar.
Wow. And
I know.
Was that Willy Wonka?
No, it
I'm just
was
kidding.
not. It was Joseph Fry by Jabs.
Ah.
And then by 1868, we have this little company that started called Cadbury. And they
Hmm.
started marketing boxes of chocolate candies in England. And then by the 20th century, we have the word chocolate actually includes a range of treats that have more sugar and more additives than the original chocolate or cacao ever had, certainly. So I do think that we're seeing more in recent years, kind of a return to that a more artisan or pure use of the chocolate as
Hmm.
opposed to say those, like chocolate kisses and chocolate bunnies and that kind of chocolate. I do think we're
Hmm.
seeing a little bit more of a return to that, like a single source bean type
Yeah,
of chocolate.
absolutely. There's also a lot of information about the history of chocolate in a book that I read called Chocolate, Sweet Science, and Dark Secrets of the World's Favorite Treat by Kay Friedenborg, if you're interested in taking a deeper dive into that topic.
Well, you've also created an ebook recently on chocolate too, haven't you?
Yeah, I recently published an ebook called Big Flavors for Chocolate Lovers, and it's got 3 sections. So, the first section, you'll learn about chocolate. I've got some background information, some helpful terminology, and some fun trivia tidbits because I can't resist a trivia tidbit. And then the next section is where we'll cook. So, you get a collection of recipes that utilize chocolate. It's got a variety of dishes. I wasn't trying to do like all chocolate cookie recipes, although that would be a great book also. But just to kind of give you a variety to really experiment in your kitchen. And then there's a section to help you explore more about chocolate with a fun activity. So it's just kind of meant to be a fun and as social as you'd like it to be for that last section. Because after all, food really does bring people together in the most wonderful ways.
Well, you've also got some fun food trivia for us today as well. So, can you share any of those fun facts about chocolate?
I can always I'll always share some fun facts about anything, but one of my favorite tidbits was that in 1957, children in British Columbia actually marched on the Capitol building in Victoria to protest the rising cost of chocolate bars after World War II. They actually caused the entire business, like all the businesses in the city, to shut down for the day.
I would have probably gotten behind him on that. I marched with him. I'm all for chocolate. All right,
Yeah.
let's get back to chocolate drinks for a second. Chocolate drinks versus eating chocolate, since chocolate did start out as a drink. So now I personally prefer eating a piece of chocolate that as opposed to drinking a chocolate drink. Though I like those too, but I just would prefer to actually eat my chocolate.
Hmm.
What about you? Are you more of a fan of chocolate drinks or more eating chocolate? Because there's so many ways these days.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of options. I think I'm more of a chocolate eater than drinker also, although I know we've talked about the homemade hot cocoa recipe that I learned as a kid, and
Mhm.
that's one of my favorite things, but that just feels like a I don't know, drinking chocolate, like having hot chocolate or a mocha latte or something. It just feels different than like just a little sweet bite, of piece of chocolate. One of my favorite beverages with chocolate, I actually got on accidentally at a restaurant. Me and my husband were at a Mexican restaurant, this little hole in the wall place, and we asked for horchata, which, if you're not familiar, it's a cold rice milk beverage, very refreshing. And they brought out 2 mugs of hot chocolate, and I realized they thought that I said hot chocolate, I guess, instead of horchata. But now we were a little disappointed because it was a hot day, but we're like, all right, whatever. And then we both took a sip and we were like, whoa. It was basically like drinking a melted chocolate bar. It was so delicious. So we ended up being very happy with that order, though it was hot outside. But have you had Mexican hot chocolate ever?
Not quite like that. I mean, I have had some, but I
Mm.
think and maybe that's why I prefer to eat my chocolate because it's a much more intense experience. But
Mm-hmm.
if I could have hot chocolate like that,
Yeah.
I would probably definitely want to do it because it's that intense chocolate
Yeah.
taste. I
It's not
think I
watered
think that's
down.
why I would prefer it so much more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We hope you enjoy listening to Passing the Plate, and we'd love it if you added a pinch of spice to our recipe by leaving us a review. It lets others know what they're in for and helps us keep serving up these delicious, heartwarming stories.
So after you devour the latest episode, pop open your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. We appreciate your support and can't wait to share more delicious adventures with you on Passing the Plate.
All right. Ashley, I want to talk about the different types of chocolate for a moment, because while I know that we have milk chocolate and dark chocolate and white chocolate, I don't always really know what constitutes the difference between the two. Can you help me out?
Yeah, absolutely. So it gets a little confusing. There's something called chocolate liquor, which isn't actually something that contains alcohol at all, but that's also known as unsweetened chocolate, and it's the base ingredient for all the types of chocolate. So it's like a thick dark brown paste that's made from cacao nibs, and they're finely ground until smooth. And so that is kind of the base part of a lot of different types of chocolate. So you've got white chocolate. It's like a cream or ivory color, and it's sweetened. It's got to contain at least 20% cocoa butter and 14% milk, but it doesn't contain any cocoa solids, which is why it doesn't have that chocolatey flavor or color. But it does contain cocoa butter, so it is technically chocolate. A lot of people say white chocolate isn't chocolate. It is technically chocolate still. Milk chocolate is more that light brown. It's sweetened. It's got to have at least 10% chocolate liquor and 12% milk. And then when you move on to dark chocolate, that's that deep brown product. It's usually around 50% chocolate liquor, and it has a firmer texture than white or milk chocolate. And it typically doesn't contain dairy, but that's not a rule. And then under that dark chocolate category, you've got bittersweet and semi-sweet chocolate. They both kind of fall under that umbrella.
I need to check these out a little closer, just again for scientific purposes, to taste these and make sure I really understand the differences.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. All right. Now, you had mentioned when we were talking about this episode on chocolate about an activity that you have that involves chocolate. So I'd love for you to share that with us.
Yeah, this one's actually really fun. I walk you through how to host a cheese and chocolate pairing party or gathering if you want. It would actually, I know it's February when this episode's going to air. It would be a really fun Valentine's or Galentine's Day activity since that's coming up. But yeah, it's I kind of walk you through the process of how to set it up and take notes. I give you guidelines on the types of cheeses that you should get and what percentages of chocolate to pair with them, and how to take your notes to figure out like what you think of each of the pairings.
All right. Now, this is something I really want to do. And it's I'd never really thought about putting chocolate and cheese together. It just wouldn't have come up because I love chocolate, but I also love cheese, guys. So if I were going to do this, what would you recommend, like, for the first time? Like, if I'm just kind of getting started and just trying to kind of get these pairings together and have a couple of friends over, what would you recommend as kind of like a beginner chocolate cheese pairing?
Yeah. So if you just wanted to like go to the store and find some things without like the breakdown that have in this ebook, what I would recommend is just going for a variety of textures and types or strengths of both cheese and chocolate. So having some more mild things that you would taste first and those lighter chocolates first, and then moving to more strongly flavored or aged cheeses. Definitely if you're going to do a blue cheese, put that at the end, because if you eat something that potent at the beginning, you're kind of going to blow out your palate and you're not going to be able to appreciate the other items. So having that kind of progression from mild to strong is good.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you're doing a chocolate cheese pairing, should you eat the cheese first or should you eat the chocolate first? So like if you're doing, say, the milk chocolate and then a milder cheese, does it matter?
So the way I've done this before for some groups online. So what I've found is you take in kind of the aroma and the appearance of the cheese first, then the chocolate, and then taste the cheese again after you have had the chocolate, because sometimes it tastes a little different. Like having that chocolate, I don't know, I feel like you can kind of appreciate some different notes sometimes after you've had that.
Well, that's really fascinating. It's really
Hmm.
interesting
But
how that would work.
but you could absolutely do it the other direction too. Like however you whatever feels right. Like I don't want to gatekeep how you enjoy it. I just think that the whole fun of it is exploring and kind of trying something new and different. And maybe if you if you go to like a cheese shop or a grocery store that has somebody behind the cheese counter, you can ask them, say, "Hey, ask them maybe if they have any unique cheeses and ask them if they have any thoughts on what would pair nicely with it." And it doesn't have to be chocolate. I mean, you could do this with fruits, you could do this with all sorts of things, but this was just kind of like one way to kind of explore something different, and it's a good excuse to have a party, you know?
Well, there is that. It's a good excuse to eat cheese and chocolate, quite frankly. But
Absolutely.
but no, I think that's a really I like the idea of trying it different ways and seeing how, you know, how each could play up textures or play up
Mhm.
taste and notes that might come up
Yeah.
otherwise. So
And
thanks for that.
yeah, absolutely. And I have, like I said, in my breakdown, I give you some just like general guidelines, but I also give like specific examples if you want to find a specific type of goat cheese or whatever. Like here's a couple brands that it doesn't have to be that, but if you're the type of person who needs like a little bit more hand holding at the store to feel like you're getting something there. But yeah, it's really interesting to see at the end like what everybody thought, like who rated what the highest and all that, and what the favorite pairing was. But thinking back to your future chocolatier track, which I'm so here for, Lisa. Like I would love to see this actually happen. It could also be fun to do a tasting or even a pairing with different types of chocolate truffles. With or without the cheese. I'm just saying, like, you could have a whole get together where you have like different truffles and see what people think. I mean,
Well, I'm up for that.
yeah.
Absolutely.
There's just
Yeah, I think that would be really cool to be able to try that and see the different types that are out
yeah.
there.
For science.
For science, of course, of course. I want to be the betterment of mankind. We're using through chocolate.
It's very selfless and we appreciate your service.
You're welcome.
So now that we've got you all craving chocolate, we will send you off to find the links and to the resources that we discussed in today's episode at passingtheplate.org/53.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Passing the Plate. We hope you enjoyed our journey into the world of food, traditions, and the amazing connections they create.
As always, it's been a pleasure sharing these delicious stories with you. Remember, food is more than just sustenance. It's a way to connect the dots between our past, present, and future.
And until next time, happy eating, happy connecting, and pass the plate. Head to passingtheplate.org/podcast for show notes.